Good afternoon, class. This is Teacher Esme once again, and welcome to our English class. Today, we are going to learn about the literary criticism. Last week, we have learned different techniques in critiquing a selection. Now, we will learn the different approaches used in critiquing literary masterpiece. So, to begin with, let us have identify our objectives first for this week. Before the week ends, we will be able to first define various literary approaches. Next, read and analyze texts using various literary approaches. Then, explain how the elements specific to a genre contribute to the theme of a particular literary selection. And explain how a selection may be influenced by culture, history, environment, and other factors. And of course, to critique a literary selection based on the following approaches: formalists or structuralists, moralists, and Marxists. So let us check to define the following literary criticism. So the literary criticism is the evaluation of literary works. This includes the classification by genre, analysis of structure, and judgment of value. So literary criticism asks what literature is, what it does, and what it is worth. A literary critic seeks to reach a logical and reasonable understanding of not only what a text author intends for it to mean, but also what different cultures and ideologies render it capable of meaning. Literary criticism is the method used to interpret any given work of literature. The different schools of literary criticism provide us with lenses. Later on, we will identify what is lenses, which ultimately reveal important aspects of the literary work. So that is how we define the literary criticism. Next is let us understand the formalism. So what is formalist? Using formalism, a critic can show how the various parts of a work are welded together to make an organic whole. This approach examines a text as a self-contained object. It does not, therefore, concern itself with biographical information about the author, historical events outside of the story, or literary allusions, mythological patterns, or psychoanalytical traits of the characters, except those aspects described specifically in the text. So, a formalist critic examines the form of the work as a whole, the form of each individual part of the text, the individual scenes and chapters, the characters, the setting, the tone, the point of view, the diction, and all other elements of the text which join to make it a single text. After analyzing each part, the critic then describes how they work together to give meaning, the theme, or to the text. So you are going to find out the underlying theme by understanding the elements, the focus, the organization structure, the word choice and language, the multiple meanings, to understand the denotative or connotative meaning of the text. Okay, so that is how we define formalist. Now let us proceed to moralists. A moralistic approach focuses individuals, couples, families, and professionals on a moralistic definition of relationship, life, and family. Processes that presumes a moral ascendancy of one value system over others. Okay? In moralistic approach, a tendency rather than a recognized goal within literary criticism to judge literary works according to moral rather than formal principles. In this approach, there is judging literary works by their ethical teachings and by their effects on readers. Literature that is ethically sound and encourage virtue is praised. In this approach, literature that misguides and corrupts is condemned. So that is how we define the moralists. How about the Marxists? Okay. Marxist is not merely a sociology of literature concerned with how novels get published and whether they mention the working class. Its aim is to explain the literary work more fully, and this means a sensitive attention to its forms, styles, and meanings. But it also means grasping those forms, styles, and meaning as the product of a particular history. Okay, in Marxist criticism is based on the social and economic theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Their beliefs include the following. Value is based on labor. The working class will eventually overthrow the capitalist middle class. In the meantime, the middle class exploits the working class. And um, another one is the most institutions, say for example, religious, legal, educational, and governmental, are corrupted by middle-class capitalists. In Marxist critics, apply these economic and social theories to literature by analyzing ideologies that support the elite and place the working class at a disadvantaged manner. So we call it class conflict. Okay, so that is how we define Marxist. Now let us answer number 5 in your assignment. So again, put a check mark in your assignment. Okay, if we have the same thought. If not, please send me the pictures of your assignment and allow me to check yours. Okay, so the question here is how these literary approaches help you understand the literary masterpiece. Okay, so um, this would be my answer. People have been telling stories and sharing responses to stories since the beginning of time. By reading and discussing literature, we expand our imagination, our sense of what is possible, and our ability to empathize with others. Reading and discussing literature can enhance our ability to write. It can sharpen our critical faculties, enabling us to assess works and better understand why literature can have such a powerful effect on our lives. And it's true, okay? Most of us we are fond of making stories, okay? Exchanging stories of our lives, exchanging stories about the movie that we have watched or the stories that we have read. And from that time on, we are going to analyze what we have read, what we have told, what we have watched. So we are starting to analyze and interpret what we have watched, and suddenly we tend to connect that into our own lives. Okay, so that is how these literary approaches help us understand the literary masterpiece, because these literary approaches happen to have this critic or the kind of critics that enable us to understand the deeper meaning of the literary text. Okay, so let's now proceed to our topic about the literary criticism, which we have defined a while ago. The literary criticism has two main functions. Okay, so the first is to analyze, study, and evaluate works of literature. Now, here's the question. Why do we have to analyze? Okay, so talking about experiences enhances our enjoyment of them. Talking about experiences involves the search for meaning, which increases our understanding of literature. because Socrates said, so the life which is unexamined is not worth living. Remember that we tend to reflect, we tend to think of our lives from the past, and we pick out all the lessons from our own experiences. Okay. Next is that is how also how that is the example of the manner why we need to analyze, study, and evaluate works of literature. So why do we need to study? Okay, literary criticism helps us to understand what is important about the text, its structure, its context, the social, economic, historical, what is written, how the text manipulates the reader. Okay, and it's true, right? We sometimes put ourselves in the shoe of the character in the story that we have read. And sometimes we thought of the word history repeats itself because it happens that there are stories in our life or experiences in our life that we could compare from the past stories. Okay, so this is the first function of literary criticism. Next is to form general principles for the examination of works of literature. Okay, so what do we mean by this? Okay, to form general principles is something like that. Literary theory is a description of the underlying principles. One might say the tools by which we attempt to understand literature. All literary interpretation draws on a basis in theory that can serve as a justification for very different kinds of critical activity. It is literary theory that formulates the relationship between author and work. Literary theory develops the significance of race, class, and gender for literary study, both from the standpoint of the biographical author and analysis of their themselves presence within texts. So that is another function of literary criticism. Next, let us answer this. What does this literary work mean? Okay, different approaches or lenses help us to discover rich and deeper meaning. That's first. Next, each lens has its strengths and weaknesses. Then, each lens is valuable. Another one is try to become a pluralist rather than an inflexible supporter of one. Okay, what do we mean by this? Okay, so by understanding the lenses, later on I'll give you this meaning. Let us help to discover rich and deeper meaning. Okay, so when we say lenses, this has something to do with the literary criticism on how we view the text. Okay, how we view the text and how we understand the text by um, getting the deeper meaning. It seems like we are using eyeglasses. That we need to use the eyeglasses for us to be able to read, okay, clearly the text. But here in literary criticism, we use the lenses by identifying the connection of the author, the text, and the reader's understanding of the text. Okay, so it has strengths and weaknesses. Why? Because there are times that that text might be true to you, but might not be true to other theories. Okay, so that is the weaknesses. The strengths is the practices, the beliefs. Okay, so the questions raises, so the questions that have that will be raised, something like that. So each lens is valuable because each lens has the ability to view the text based on their own perception. Okay? So when we say try to become a pluralist rather than an inflexible supporter of one is we need to be open with some opinions or some point of view or perception of the other readers of the text. So there you go. The critical literary lenses. A critical literary lens influences how you look at a work. A great example that is often used is the idea of putting on a pair of glasses and the glasses affecting how you view your surroundings. The lens you choose is essentially a new way to focus on the work and is a great tool for analyzing works from different views. Okay? So next is okay, the literary criticism approaches. Okay, so here are the different approaches by understanding the beliefs, the practices, and the questions that will be raised in that particular literary approach. So let us now begin with the formal. Is how we define the literary approaches, which are the formalists, the moralists, and Marxists. Here below are the examples of literary criticisms. Okay, the paragraph that we are going to present to you. You are going to identify the literary approach applied for each paragraph. Then include a brief explanation about your chosen literary criticism approach. Okay, here's number one. The Tortoise and the Hare is a children's story, and we can get moral or lessons from it. And the lesson for this story is slow and steady wins the race. Though it's a children's story, it's still imparted lesson, and that's what moral criticism criticizes. It looks for the lesson in the literary works. What do you think is the literary approach can be used in this particular paragraph or story? Yes, that is moralist, since it portrays the ethical teaching, right? So the next one is the story, the lottery. I believe that you are familiar with this one because um, this is part of your lesson during your grade 9. Okay? Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is a horrifying example of what happens when society can only distinguish two classes, specifically the downtrodden working class and the wealthy middle class. This is made clear through the characterization of the higher class as well as the lower class and the effects on social change due to the class differences. Okay, so which literary approach you think can be used in this is fit or rather in this particular story? Yes, very good. That is Marxist. Okay, since this is the struggle of the struggle of ideologies and class conflict. Okay, so let us now proceed to number 3. Mary had a little lamb is a metaphor for Christianity. The lamb represents the Lamb of God, Jesus. And Mary represents the Mother of God, the Virgin Mary. The lamb's fleece is white as snow, representing the purity of the soul of Jesus. Everywhere that Mary went is a metaphor for the presence of Jesus in the life of those who follow Christianity. So, what do you think is the literary approach that can be fit in this particular story? Very good. That is formalist. Why? Because we tend to get the classification of this story and identifying the elements by understanding the meaning behind the meaning behind the words by using the symbolism. So that is what we call formalist. All right. So very good. You did a great job because you'll be able to understand our lesson. Now I have here another example paragraph. The thief who became a disciple. A short story taken from the glorious little collection Sand Flesh, Sand Bones. Okay, allow me to read this aloud to you. One evening, as Shichiri Jun was reciting sutras, that is Buddhist scriptures, a thief with a sharp sword entered, demanding either his money or his life. Shichiri told him, "Do not disturb me. You can find the money in that drawer." Then he resumed his recitation. A little while afterwards, he stopped and called, "Don't take it all. I need some to pay taxes with tomorrow." The intruder gathered up most of the money and started to leave. "Thank a person when you receive a gift," Shichiri added. The man thanked him and made off. A few days afterwards, the fellow was caught and confessed among others the offense against Shichiri. When Shichiri was called as a witness, he said, um, "This man is no thief, at least as far as I am concerned. I gave him the money and he thanked me for it." After he had finished his prison term, the man went to Shishiri and became his disciple. Okay? So, what literary approach can be applied in this particular story? Alright, so that is what we call the moralist approach. Now, we are going to uh, identify or dig deeper with the understanding of the story. Why we call it moralist approach? Because it teaches a moral or lesson of kindness. Because of how a man came into Shichiri's house to steal money, and Shichiri allowed him to do so. Then the thief said, "Thank you." When the thief was caught, he went on trail and Shichiri dropped the charges because of how the man said thank you to Shichiri. This is an act of kindness because of how Shichiri allowed the man to have money and having dropped the charges because of a simply thank you response. Okay? So, let us now identify the theme from this story. Respecting one's wishes, and in return, you will have one's respect. Okay? Remember that you cannot ask respect. Instead, you have to earn it. Okay? So, I believe that you'll be able to do the next activity for you. This poem by Maya Angelou entitled Phenomenal Woman. Okay, so you are going to find out how this particular poem used the formalist approach. Okay, you have to do the same thing.